Erik Schwartz, welcome to What AI Means for Us Now. It's great to have you on today. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Chris. Thanks so much for having me on. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Yes, excited to chat to you. I know we've had kind of casual conversations in the past, haven't we? And I've always found yeah, your approach interesting. And I think just to let people know what kind of drew us here today, we were chatting around DeepSeek. I thought you had a really logical approach to what's going on. But that kind of almost seems like old news now with the AI summit in Paris recently.
I know. I mean, that was sort of all the hype last week, and now we're on
Yeah,
something completely new. It's
yeah,
the pace that we're moving at. I just got off a call a few minutes ago before this conversation, and I was just saying to somebody else, it was an older gentleman who was like, Eric, you know, I'm really having trouble trying to keep up, and for us in the older generation, I'm really looking for some resources and trying to find ways to stay in touch. And I said, you know, it's not you, right? And I'm not even referring to myself. The younger generation, like our kids, right? The new entrants into the workforce, they're having trouble keeping up as well because we're moving at a pace right now that's completely unprecedented in anything
yeah.
we've seen in the last that I've ever seen in my career or lifetime.
Yeah, it's interesting because as a business owner, it's like I've only got so much time in the day, and what AI tool do I spend to actually learn? Because it's not for the want of not wanting to learn these tools. It's just there's so many out there, and I think the podcast originally started for me as just a little bit of fun, but actually now it's turning into I want to help amplify the right voices in the community because it's people are kind of asking me who they should turn to and follow. So yeah, thanks for coming on and sharing your thoughts. So, yeah, I think just to let everyone know at home, we'll kind of general conversation, but I think you've got a great background in kind of Rexis as well, which we'll kind of touch on. And it'd be good to get your future predictions and where you see the market going, because I think, again, when we originally started, it was, what do you see in the next couple of years? But I think I wasn't really setting people up for success with that question. It's kind of, what do you see in the next 6 to 12 months? But it'd be great just to, if you could talk people through your career history, how you got to today, and into your role and, kind of lessons learned along the way, kind of two questions there.
Yeah, of course, Chris. I'd be happy to share that with you and the group and everyone listening. So, as you mentioned, my background is in information retrieval. So I came out of university I studied electrical engineering in school. I was always really drawn to the applied use of technology and electronics. And I think the thing that resonated the most with me was really about computer engineering. Like I did courses on, learning how to code and learning things like Fortran and Pascal. People remember those languages back then, but I really loved like the microcomputer code, like, really putting bits into a microprocessor and storing logic in there and getting it to compute. And so I really resonated with the compute, but I loved that this whole assembly of a system of things coming together to actually get something done. Putting a little LED screen on a little microcomputer and getting the numbers to count up from 1 to 8 was like this is groundbreaking, but it seems so overly simple. But I started my career after university. This is like the mid 90s when I came out of school, and we had the first web browsers were just starting to come out. This is like even before Netscape, which has sort of gone and done its life. There was a browser that came out called Mosaic. It was the first internet web browser that was sort of ever out there. Came from the Supercomputer Center out of Champaign, Illinois. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what the impact of it was, but it was so simple and so easy that it just resonated with me from the start that I could sit there and write something with HTML and disseminate it broadly across the internet. Now, obviously, these are all common things right now, but like that just seems so wildly powerful. I don't know what this is, but I want to do that. So I took a job right after school, and I went down to Washington D.C. and got a job at the Naval Research Laboratory. If you've ever flown into Washington D.C., if you fly into the Reagan Airport, which is the airport right in D.C., which actually came up in the news just a week ago because there was a horrible accident a couple weeks ago with a helicopter and an airplane colliding, but it was right at that airport. But we were across the river in a building that had a huge radar dish on top of it. My boss at the time used to call it the biggest bird bath in Washington, D.C., because it was an old defunct radar dish. And this is where they invented radar. They were sending sound signals across the Potomac. And every time a boat would come across, they would have this big blip that would block their radio signals. And they invented radar at this lab. And so we started building digital libraries at that lab. And so we started taking the library physically was out of space, and they had research journals and reports that they were creating on the laboratory, and had no space to store this paper anymore. So we were digitizing, we were putting it online so the researchers on campus could get access to it. And so that started my passion and love for information retrieval. So we took this content, we put it into a search engine, we made it available for these guys to find reports. We started exploring how do we get access to the full text so they could look for words inside that context. We were doing OCR, we were recognizing characters, but we quickly ran into some problems where the words that they would use wouldn't always match the words that were in the paper. They had a thought or a concept in their head about a problem area that they would solve, but those words weren't necessarily in the paper. And so we started building these very sort of simplistic ways of sort of finding ways to interpret what they meant, right? What was their intent to connect with content? And so I like to say that I've been in the same problem space for 30 years, and now the technology has come around to actually solve those things with large language models. And you have things
Mm.
like ChatGPT, and you have Claude, and all these great tools that are amazing at understanding what we're looking for, helping us find that information and pulling it back out of that. So just a bit about my background, right? And so how I got there. I went and I spent my time building digital libraries. We were building them from the government and for libraries back in the United States, back in the 90s and 2000s. I started working for search engine vendors in the 2000s, a company called Convera, which had a product called Retrievalware. They were acquired by a company called Fast that was based out of Norway, who was then acquired by Microsoft. And so in 2008, we all joined Microsoft. So I was a Microsoft employee for a couple of years in the SharePoint team, helping manage customers into that acquisition. Then in 2010, I was in Washington, D.C., and Microsoft really wanted everyone in Seattle, in Redmond at the time, that was building products and making search engines. And so I started working for large corporates where we ran and built large search engine platforms or knowledge discovery platforms that powered the business. And so I worked for Comcast for a number of years where we built a large data and access platform that was based on search that powered their entire video experience. So every time you sat down and watched TV, whether it was mobile, web, or set-top box, you engage with the search engine to find the content or find the channel that you wanted to watch, and then enabled the television programming. And then in 2018, I moved over here to the United Kingdom. I came to London to build a knowledge discovery platform for Elsevier. And while we were at Elsevier, we built one of the first interfaces of a large language model. We built a tool called Scopus AI, which took ChatGPT, a large language model, and put it on this trusted database of over 90 million abstracts of academic research. So we proved that we could use large language models on top of a trusted data source to deliver trusted results for academics, which brings me up to today. And now I'm the chief AI officer at a company called Tricon Infotech.
Nice. Yes. Thank you for sharing that. Some interesting points. I think to your just bring it back a second when you mentioned around you're going through a boom, and we're obviously going through a bit of an AI boom now. Is there any kind of similarities you see? Because we're going into uncharted territory here of maybe what went on during the dot-com boom or anything like that, or things that you've seen in the past that you're starting to see similar signs now of how the market's kind of shaping up.
Uh, Pattern of the mid to late 90s is absolutely repeating itself. And I think the one voice of caution that I'll give, right? We're sitting here. It's been since November of 2022, right? When ChatGPT came on the field in a big way. When ChatGPT was first launched, it was November 2022, and everyone's head was blown when they realized what could happen. And it's really only been about a little over 2 years since that launched, and now we're at a place where AI applications are starting to become really mainstream, and we're starting to really build them into our businesses, and we're seeing AI in lots of different affordances and products. Um, so it was very similar to what was happening with the Web 1.0 wave in the early 90s. But we have to keep in mind that took a good 5 years from about 93 to about 96, 97, right? Before we started seeing real products and services on the internet. And so we're seeing a similar cycle where there's a ton of startups, lots of little ideas, lots of interest and lots of valuation. And that's gonna get aggregated. It's gonna get pulled up, right? For example, when OpenAI releases deep research, right? Suddenly there's a whole bunch of little applications, or they release computer use, or their little tool called Operator. There's or Claude releases Canvas, which is a way to kind of visualize real code on screen, or visualizations or documents on screen. Suddenly dozens of little businesses sort of disappear because they are subsumed by this feature that's part of a larger language model. And it's an exact pattern that we've seen before, where people will go out, try different ideas, experiment with them, maybe even get some funding to get some programs, but then they get absorbed by these larger platforms.
Yeah, and it seems like, that last year there's big focus on foundational model training, et cetera. This year, kind of with what's happened with DeepSeek, et cetera, everyone's kind of pushing towards the application side, it seems. Obviously, your background in, product, um, what are your thoughts on where, these applications should sit, and, how potentially you would position in the current market, and where the needs are, I guess?
Yeah, no, it's a big question. I think, at this point, it's a very much a crystal ball question, right? I think it's
Yeah.
everyone's guess in terms of what exactly going to happen. For the foreseeable future, we're still going to have a big dependence on these large language models. They're really powerful, and they're really big enablers. I think over the last couple of years, there's been this sort of criticism of what people call wrapper apps, where someone builds some code, builds a use case, builds a scenario on top of these large language models, right? And, it creates this risk that we just spoke about a moment ago, right? Where these large language models could add a new feature, and suddenly those applications become meaningless, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, what was happening a lot for the last 2 years is Google would release something, or Meta would Google would release a Gemini model, Meta would release a Llama model, Anthropic would release a version of Claude, even X Twitter would release a version of Grok, and they were all kind of the same, right? They were all maybe trying to catch up with OpenAI. Maybe they leap over slightly in terms of the benchmarks, in terms of the capabilities, but they were all more or less the same in terms of what they could do. Some people might like Claude, for example, for coding purposes, or they might like ChatGPT for question and answer services, or they might like to draw pictures or something inside of X, right? Instead of Grok. And so people started having sort of things that they like to do better with them, but there wasn't a huge amount of specialization that was happening. So the tide kind of turned from, is it just a wrapper, right? Or actually, am I building a moat around my own value, my own experience? I'm managing customers. I'm creating a business around these customers, and I have the flexibility to point to different models as they evolve, right? So I think we're going to see this, like, just like the pendulum swings back and forth. We're going to see this dynamic here for a little bit longer. But I think the thing that's clearly going to happen is that people will start to embed AI capabilities inside their products and services and workflows, and these will become a lot smarter. And this is where we get into agents, right? And we get into this whole notion of what is an agent, and what's it going to do, and how's it going to change for me.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting having a chat recently with a friend trying to define, what an agent is. I think that's a big thing. I don't know if you've got would like to go on record and define what you think an agent is right now.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think there's a lot of confusion with, intelligent workflow and bot and agents and assistants. But I have a very simple definition that I use for agents. So today, if you think about it, like ChatGPT or any of these tools we've just talked about a moment or two ago, those are really chatbots in the simplest way. I ask a question, it gives me an answer back, right? And an agent, and so we're starting to see these chatbots can do things a little bit more autonomously, right? For example, we talked about deep research a minute ago. Deep research, you can give it a task, and it'll go out on the internet, right? It'll go on the internet, it'll find some things, it'll do some reasonings, and it'll come back and bring some content back, and generate a report. And what's really interesting about it, and this is where we're starting to get into what an agent is, I'll get to a definition in just a second, is that it didn't just take the single question and then start to go answer the question and fill the response. It actually started to refine its plan, right, as it gathered information. So it went out and asked a question and said, "Oh, okay, I'm finding some good resources, or I'm finding things that maybe aren't that relevant. Maybe I need to ask a better question." This is agentic behavior, right? So it's the ability, right, for a system to say, "Let me give you a goal, right? I'll give you a task, and you go do something." That task could be something like set up a meeting with Chris, right? Or find some time to do a podcast. That goal could be something like, "Hey, plan me a vacation somewhere warm because I haven't seen the sunshine in months in the United Kingdom. So let's, and here's my budget. Let's go do something like that." But it's a goal. And then the agent then needs to be able to take that goal and build a plan, right? How am I going to solve this goal? How am I going to figure out how to get the information I need to solve this goal? And typically the way it does that is it leverages different tools, right? The tool could be internet. The tool could be a database. The tool could be your web browser. The tool could be any number of services that are provided inside of our enterprise or out publicly available to help accomplish that goal. So it's planning, it's got tools, right? And it's got the ability to refine its plan as it gathers information from the tools. The other bit that an agent also has is it's got memory, right? So it's got what we call long-term memory and short-term memory. The long-term memory is just let's say, "Hey, I remember Eric. Eric loves to go to the beach. His wife loves to go to the beach. So when he says he wants to go to the holiday, let's not look for a ski trip. Let's look for a beach trip because I know that's what he's looking for. I know that's going to make his wife super happy." So that's kind of this notion of long-term memory. It's like this notion of personalization, right? Or always remember before I send the credit card in to make sure I get permission. That's long-term memory. Short-term memory is like, what am I working on right now? And how do I help refine my plan? I've gathered some flight information. I've gathered some hotel information. What else do I need? Oh, I need to
Mm.
get a transport, right? I need to connect the dots, right? So how do I make sure that there's a smooth agenda going through? So going back, right? So it's a system that can accomplish a goal, right? It can build a plan. It can refine its plan. It can use tools and then take action on those tools to go accomplish that goal. That's how I define an agent. So it's really intelligent workflow with the ability to think as it moves. And this is where we're getting into with deep research. This is exactly what we're getting into. We're getting into this agentic behavior where I give it a task and it can go off and take 5, 20, 30 minutes to go off, find the right sets of information that are relevant to the goal at hand to bring back a report that's cohesive and write it out, and then write it out to me in a level that's appropriate for my audience, which is typically like, a PhD level research report that I can ask for.
Yeah, that's really interestingly put and very well said. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think that a lot of companies now are looking at adoption, and obviously it was last year. Everybody, it feels like maybe people are looking to adopt agents before they know what problem they're potentially going to solve because there's a little bit of FOMO in the market, I guess, right now. I think you've got the unique you've got the unique perspective. You come from a technical engineering background, then products. What should companies be looking for in terms of when adopting this technology? How would you actually evaluate a product for your needs? And um, yeah, how do you see it? You've come from a Rex's personalization background. How would you see it affecting personalization or the retail markets, for example, or e-commerce?
Yeah, no, I think it's we're really just beginning to answer. And I think if we come back and have this conversation in 6 months, I think we'll have a very different conversation. And not a year from now, but 6 months from now, we'll have a very different conversation. The reason why is that agents is still very much an emerging field. And so I think we have a fairly well agreed upon pattern in terms of what the agent needs to do, in terms of like the goals and the sort of things that I laid out. However, there are some challenges with the way the large language models work to make these things really repeatable and make sure that every time I ask for a task, it actually solves it at the level of quality that I need. And how do we put the right frameworks around it? How do we make sure that it's asking the right questions, that it's keeping the human in the loop, that it's not making assumptions where it should? Like, so there's a number of things around these patterns. I mean, when I say to you, Chris, go get me, go book me a holiday, right? For a human, that's pretty straightforward to do. I know the parameters of what I need to work with, where I need to get checks and where I need to get validation. The agents, we still need to learn that. We still need to put those controls in place. And so that's evolving. But to answer your question specifically, what we're seeing in the marketplace right now is that there are a number of businesses, and a lot of these are smaller and medium-sized businesses that are saying, God, this AI thing is coming. I need to put agents in my business. And actually, what they really need to do is they need to actually start doing some simple automation. There are still people that are taking orders via email, reading the orders and typing them into a spreadsheet, right? And so, like, these things are inherently solvable, and they don't require an AI agent automate that. But it's been someone's job for the last 10 years to kind of read that email and put it into the order system so that an order can be shipped to somebody else, right? So these manual processes that we're still doing in our businesses are still there. And those can be replaced by just simple automation platforms, like something like Mate or Zapier, right? And there's lots of guys that are out there that are really pro at putting these things together. And they don't require a whole lot of, a lot of oversight to get that automation going, which means that you can free up capacity and talent within your organization to take on harder problems. So that being said, right, I think we're going to see over the next year, you know, getting an Airbnb, it's like, you're not going to have to go and think about all the little, like, if I want to go and I want to have a nice night out, right? I want to plan a date. It'll be that simple where I'll be able to go and say, I just want to plan a date. And there'll be applications that start to emerge and say, I'm going to be a date planning service. It's going to take care of everything for you, right? It's going to take care of making sure your date, first of all, your date's available, and then they have freedom on their calendar. They're going to find a nice restaurant, a place that they're going to like. They're going to take care of the car reservation. They're going to make sure there's a box of chocolates or a bouquet of flowers waiting in the car for you when you get there. They're also going to check, just like we kind of do with Deliveroo or any of these online services or Uber Eats. It's going to sort of take you, or City Mapper, one of my favorites, right? It's as you kind of go through your journey, it's going to keep track of where you are in your journey and say, is everything going all right? Do I need to adjust my plan? Oh, the Uber didn't show up, or there's a lot of traffic. Instead of taking Uber, you know what? Just take the bus instead. You can have a romantic time on top of it. Everyone loves taking the bus around London. Go, it's nighttime. You've got extra time in your plan. We'll move the booking back a little bit. Go hop on the bus. Take a sightseeing tour around London. Take in the sights, but its ability to sort of adjust on the fly is what's going to come, and we're going to see this in products and services of commerce. In the coming months and weeks, not weeks, maybe months and years, right?
Yeah, no, I think you touched on an interesting point there. The market's, changing it every 6 months. I think, personally from like a business perspective, I found when you're trying to roadmap technology and AI, you're constantly pivoting and shifting to kind of the way the market's changing. I think you're obviously come from as I say, a technical background. Now you're more strategic. How do you actually strategize and, plan a roadmap for such a quick moving market?
Well, yeah, that's a brilliant question, and I think, if I told you that one, I give away all my value. No, I'm just kidding. Um, but I think a couple of things. The most important thing as we start to introduce any technology like this into our organizations and into our business, right, is we have to keep it really focused on where there's a return on that investment, right? There's still a lot of concerns, a lot of risk. People have a lot of fear around AI. They don't understand it. So there's still opportunities for us to go and introduce AI literacy programs where we teach executives, right, how AI works. What is it capable of doing today, and what's it not capable of doing? We teach the staff, right, how to use AI to help them with the tasks that take a lot of work for them. We help organizations think about where there is lots of friction or manual tasks, like this example of the email coming in, right, and putting it into an order form. Identify these really manual tasks. There's a lot of businesses, Chris, out there today, big businesses, really serious big businesses that run their business entirely on spreadsheets, right? I'm talking manufacturing, I'm talking construction, I'm talking events businesses, right? Like these really large businesses, they're distributed, they're not repeatable, they haven't even built basic automation into their flows yet. And they're really running on a lot of manual and it works, right? But they can carve a lot more value out of those businesses and do it a lot more efficiently with a lot fewer staff by looking at how they can do some automation. And so it's about literacy, it's about understanding the risk, it's about exposing the tools, it's about focusing on fundamental business basics, which is how do I apply the right technology for the right problem? Don't just throw AI in there because it's cool and sexy, but let's make sure we're solving the right problems and there's a real return on investment. And then we do
Mm.
it in an intelligent way. That we're not throwing a really expensive model into something that's got to scale, because it doesn't. If I got to call ChatGPT or this new reasoning models that are getting quite pricey, if I got to call them on every workflow, then that's going to be expensive, right? I'm not going to be able to build this cool dating app experience, right? Where if I've got to go and call a $20 model every time, right? That it costs me $20 to get that updated. So we have to be intelligent in how we use these things and how we use these tools. Um, and then what's also going to happen too is these models are going to get smaller and smaller, so that we'll have purpose built models that people can use for their businesses, inside their computers and inside even their phones. And that's where we'll go in the next year or two. Is that we'll have our own personal AIs that'll really shrink down and really sort of understand us and understand a lot about us on a personal basis.
Fair. Well put again, and I think that segues nicely into Tricon. First of all, I think yeah, Chief AI Officer. Less than a year ago, no one was calling themselves that. So I'd love to just understand, what you think a good Chief AI Officer does, roles and responsibilities, and how you would define it, and then I think that will lead nicely into what you're actually working on as well.
Yeah. So I think when I took this role a year or so ago, about 12 months, 9 months ago, back in April of last year, I was fully cognizant that in a year or two, this role may not exist. But the reason for this role today is that it creates a focal point around the organization to help us understand exactly um, where AI fits and help us manage the controls around the pace of change with AI. And it's my strong belief is that in a few years things will settle down and things will develop over time, so that uh, these tools, these capabilities will roll back into sort of more traditional leadership roles that we have in the organization. Where it's a product officer, a chief technology officer, right? These roles will fall back into as we understand the technology and we've deployed the change, right, in the short term. But in the short term, it's about how do we help organizations, how do we help our own organization build the right policies around AI? Where do we use it? Where do we not use it? How do we stay on top of the technology? How do we integrate it safely into our business? How do we put the right ethics around it? How do we start thinking about how we can train both our employees and our customers how to use it? And then how do we use it as a conversation starter to really drive new business within our organization? And today it's, a lot of customers will come to us and say, um, listen, I've got, I want to put AI in my business, right? Going back to this whole automation thing, I want to put AI into my business. And the short answer is that actually what they really need to do is they really need to get their data estate in order, right? They need to figure out where their data is. They need to stop moving it from place to place to place. They need to sort of settle it down, figure out exactly what the data is. They need to clean their data. They need to organize their data, and they need to bring it into applications that help drive value. And then we can come back and say, once we've got that data, because AI is a really data hungry application, loves lots of data, but it's a garbage in, garbage out problem. If I throw messy data into the AI, we're going to have messy experiences that come on top of that. And so organize your data, get it clean, get your state in order, and then we can layer AI capabilities on top of it to really build good experiences.
Hey, so these companies that you're helping, what would you say their biggest challenges in adoption? Is it the education piece? Is it the data piece? Is it ethics? I imagine more data or education.
Of the companies that I'm working with right now today, lots of companies are in lots of different places in their AI journey. Some have been investing in AI for quite some time. Others have been doing proof of concepts, where they are taking that proof of concept, they're doing some experimentation, testing it out, and then getting it to work. It's pretty straightforward actually to get the AI to work, to build an application to work. But they really haven't tied it back to the business yet. Others have put in policies in place where they've said basically don't use it, don't use AI at all. Or others are embracing AI and said let's put it into our products as quick as possible. Other organizations are really focusing on literacy and ethics, and making sure they're compliant with the regulations that are out there. And so everyone's sort of like lots of different companies are on lots of different journeys. One of the biggest barriers that I see today as I talk to clients is this whole notion of AI literacy. There's a lot of fear, both at the board level and the executive level, as well as the front line, the staff, the teams that are working on it. Um, they're afraid that their jobs are going to get taken. The staff, they're afraid the jobs are going to be replaced by AI, and the C-suite and the executive leaders say, "Listen, there's a ton of pressure that we're getting, downward pressure from the board and from external factors to incorporate AI into our products. We've got to get it into our products as soon as possible." Excuse me. There's an unnatural rush to put it in there. So it's really about understanding where it fits, what it can do, what it can't do, and creating that literacy program, giving people exposure to AI. How do I connect with AI? How do I use AI? How do I tie it? What problems can it solve for me? And what not? Others now need to work on their business, their policies, and put those policies in place. And then other organizations really are understand where they want to fit it, understand how to use it, but still have to get the data state in line. And so one of the things that we do is when we go and engage with a customer is we really figure out where they are in that journey, whether they need to focus on that AI literacy piece, they need to focus on the sort of staff training component of it, and whether they need to get their data estate in line, where they need to figure out whether it's strategy, whether it's policy, whether it's regulation and compliance. We can figure out there's a number of dimensions that we can look at when we look at the health of a given organization as they adopt AI. And then we take those things and we move them on a strategic journey from there. So at Tricon, because we provide a full set, we'll start typically with a business strategy. What is the business? What's the needle thing that's really going to move the needle? How do we measure that for the organization? And let's start with that as proof of concept to get to know each other and build business. A lot of failed projects inside of organizations fail because they don't tie technology back to the business. And that becomes a big problem. So we start there and then we grow it out over time, finding that low hanging fruit, finding those opportunities for automation, helping them put policies and putting regulations, compliance, and good governance in place, making sure that everyone's at the table because everyone from legal to marketing to sales, everyone in the organization wants to be involved in these conversations, and they should be. AI is a great leveler in a lot of ways because I can speak to it with language, because I can speak to it with English or whatever your native speaking language is. It doesn't require any special skills necessarily to learn how to use AI. It's just like the way you learn how to talk to somebody else. What you can speak to it just the way you would talk to a new graduate student, or train it like a really smart graduate student that's just come out of university, that's really eager and has got lots of information, but maybe doesn't have the sort of the smarts to figure out how to navigate the corporate environment. But you can learn that, right? It's really sort of straightforward to learn how to have a conversation with somebody to get them to optimize how they perform. And that's how we start thinking about AI inside the organization.
Yeah, and I think you touched on, earlier, a lot of fear around AI, and I think there's an interesting stat posted a while back that 80% of generative AI projects fail. You've obviously took a lot of things from prototype to production, and I appreciate you may not want to share all the secret sauce here, but, what are things that you've done or can do when you're taking these things through to production to increase the chances of project success and a successful launch?
Um, yeah, no, it's a great question. That you're right. That's going to depend on the use case. One example that I'll share with you is a large company, for more of a traditional company that we work with. And they were quite uncertain as to where AI was going to fit inside their business. So one of the things that we created for them was we created a safe space for them to learn how AI works. So they weren't worried about taking their AI, taking their content and sending it out to like a chat GPT or DeepSeek or any of these sort of bots and know what they're going to do with it, and not know rather what's going to happen with their content. Created a safe environment, a sandbox that they can put their content and they put their information, their data into the AI and start to see how it behaves. And they knew that it was a safe place. And they knew they could try different things. And what this enabled them is it allowed their teams to start to say, now I see how I didn't know we could do that. I didn't know that AI could actually do these things. And now I can experiment with different ideas that we can bring into our products. So that was one thing, creating this enabling place, the safe place for experimentation, trial, and learning is one thing. The second part as well is that it's super critical, especially as we start to introduce AI to our systems, that we keep human in the loops. And basically, what this means is that we don't take a product or an application and let customers talk to AI directly. A really safe best practice around implementing AI is to use AI to create things offline, right? Generate a bunch of things offline, right? Look at them, have a human approve them, right? And then put them out online. So one example, something that this is not a customer, but something we're working towards in the compliance sector, right? Is there's a lot of effort right now that goes into human evaluation that something is legally or regulatory compliant, right? And those rules are fairly well established, right? And so what we can do is we can take a piece of content or a drawing or a piece of marketing literature, and we can run it through those set of rules and have the AI kind of go through it, right? And identify, here's all the things that pass muster. Here's some areas of concern, and we can flag those for a reviewer. So instead of spending 3 weeks having to read the content, understand it, get deep into the literature, compare it to what's there, we can codify that into a set of rules, put that in front of an analyst, and in an hour, then go through, say accept, deny, accept, change this to this, boom, the content's done and reviewed. And so we're preventing sort of this massive scale for end users to come in and automatically generate content, which could cost millions of dollars for large websites. We're also reducing a massive amount of cost and removing a ton of friction out of the business by enabling 80-90% of this workload through this intelligent automation.
Yeah, and it's interesting, we spoke earlier before about, somebody's potentially sat in the business, using an Excel spreadsheet and you can automate that or use agentic AI, whatever it may be. At what point is the kind of benefits realization or, how do you actually measure ROI? Because it's great that you might have swapped the process for AI, but if it's doing the exact same thing how do you measure that it's been a successful project, et cetera, and, show the value that you've delivered?
Yeah. That's gonna be where the rubber hits the road over the next couple of years, is really
Mm,
putting that measurement on the ROI. So first and foremost, like, what are the measures of success, right? A good product person, how do we successfully measure something? Where we love to start, because it's quicker, right, is to look at top line impact, right? Is this generating new new revenue, right? Is this
mm.
generating new customer engagement? Is this generating, right? And then you can honestly look at, yes, we implemented X, and now we're seeing new customers come on board. We're seeing new customer acquisition. These are things that are there's our leading indicators that we can put on top of a business project, that we can measure and we can understand quickly it's having an impact, right? When we start looking at sort of operational efficiencies, we look at time saved, or we look at labor costs. Those are all trailing indicators, right? They can sometimes take 6 months or a year to really understand. Sometimes it's even qualitative, right? But put that measurement in place and say, listen, let's put a hypothesis there about, we think there'll be time saved. I was working with one business that's again an events business, that's looking at how they set up their new events and how they acquire customers, right, through their new events business. And the process was effectively once a week, they would go to a spreadsheet, download the spreadsheet, copy it into another spreadsheet, and then look for new exhibitors that really that wanted to join their new event. And so, that team that had spent that weekly effort to sort of move these files around their organization, copy it from the back of the firewall, right? They're gonna know, hey, suddenly I don't have to do that anymore, right? I have a list of approved people with invites that have already signed up and paid, right, for my event, and I didn't have to do all that work. So like those qualitative measurements are going to start to surface in the business, and they're going to have more time to sort of think like, okay, instead of automatically accepting all these people that apply for my event, let's be a little bit more selective. Let's change the criteria a little bit more so we get better quality experiences. Let's focus on like what that experience inside the event's going to look. So now that mind shift is going to go away from all this sort of like, this mind numbing work of sort of getting everyone into the funnel into, let's actually make sure that we focus on where we can add value. So again, to summarize, so there'll be leading indicators, right, that we'll identify, and we can put those in front of a project. Those are typically going to be around other type of leading indicators you would put on any sort of product or product investment, any sort of change management investment. And then there'll be the trailing indicators, right? That'll show the overall operational efficiencies that you'll get. Those will be both quantitative and qualitative that we can put in place.
Yeah, that's super interesting and, well put. And, just a final bit on, I guess, kind of product. This is, I guess, unrelated to, Tricon, but obviously new startups popping up, daily, literally at the moment. In terms of product market fit, you know, I think the thing with machine learning is there's a lot of founders from technical engineering backgrounds who, potentially haven't gone on into product like yourself. What do you look at, or if you had a startup, how would you look at product market fit at the moment when it's becoming tighter and tighter every day?
Product market fit is always it's always a tricky question. I think a
Mm.
lot of companies, regardless of sort of the tech backend that they have, or the staffing they use, or how they go implement, or how they go to market, are always stretching for PMF, right? They're always trying to find that niche for their own businesses. I think what does this allow you to do? What does the technology allow you to do, right? Um, if you talk to any founder, right, any startup founder, how many startups fail? What's that percentage failure rate, right? And the failure rates are good. Typically from a product mindset, those are learnings, right? And what those learnings are, those are iterations, right? Those are, I tried something, it didn't work. I tried something, it didn't work. I tried something again, it didn't work. I tried something, this is resonating, right? Right. And so that's the tried and true methodology, right? That we can use to apply and find product market fit for any new business that we want to create. So what does AI enable us to do? AI enable us to we can do those iterations a lot quicker now. We can do them a lot cheaper, right? Doesn't mean that they go away. Doesn't mean that we'll get it the right time. But then as the AI gets smarter and smarter, it's going to say, oh, like here's 10 ideas. Instead of choosing 1 through 10, let's start at number 7 because we've tried that before and that works, right? So that's going to be the evolution that we're going to see. And instead of hiring a team, having to get expensive engineering, which is again, though, the whole measure twice, cut once. Engineering is one of the, and your staff and your labor is one of the most expensive parts of building any new digital product. If I can go into a tool and just use words, right, prompts to define what that tool is, to tweak it and manage what that thing is going to be, I can build that with a much smaller team and I can scale it out and build on top of these tools. Like Replic's come out with a whole set of tools right now where I can use prompts on my mobile device, right, to talk to it and build any app that I want. Now, again, they're not full scale, but they allow you to prove that idea out, right? That there is product market fit. You can build that at MVP, that minimal viable product. You can scale it up to a certain level, validate that it's not going to work at a much cheaper cost. And then once you get that validation, then you can go make that right investment, and that's going to scale.
Fair enough. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Super interesting. And, yeah, it wouldn't be a what AI means for this podcast without asking a couple of recommender systems or search questions. How do you see agentic AI affecting those specific markets and technologies?
Yeah, so I think the SEO guys are a little bit nervous at this point, right? I think uh, there certainly is, um, although Google's not reporting any lack of of traffic or decrease in ad revenue, but I think we're going to see that model shift, right? I can go into a lot of people that you talk to now are instead of going to Google to look for something, they go into ChatGPT and they say, "Hey, let me give me an answer to this." And so suddenly those ad impressions aren't happening anymore, right? And that organic traffic's not happening through SEO. Now it's happening, traffic's still happening. It's something's visiting that website on your behalf, right? But it's coming through an agent, so that the information is out there and it's being exchanged in a different way. So it raises a really interesting question. Do we need to be building websites for human consumption now? Or do we need to be building websites for AI consumption? Right. So how's that going to shift? Do I need to make it agent accessible or not? Right.
Right.
Now, I spent a lot of my time. We relocated out to the southeast coast of England, so we're out in Kent, and I still see a lot of opportunity where there's sort of a very light footprint for digital or very little digital literacy in that space. Like people don't really have websites for their businesses, or they don't really put their hours online or their menus online, or like they've gone as far as putting together a Facebook page, and that's about it. And so I think there's still real opportunities for these systems to come online and really propagate, but it's going to evolve. It's going to change. Um, Early days on this question, but I think it's going to happen. So that's one sort of thing. This is sort of on the discovery, customer discovery, finding people, finding services, finding goods in my neighborhood. But once these local shop owners and local providers start figuring out how to use these tools, right, and realize that they can go into their phone and say, "Hey, put up a website that just talks about my business," right? That's it, and it'll be online, it'll be out there, it'll be up to date with all their products, all their services. Help me tweak my offers and adjust my pricing to be more competitive. I can say that to my app. Then I'll make it more discoverable. And whether it's discoverable through a search engine or through social media, like all those things will sort of be taken care of automatically for me by an intelligent agent. And so that's a real opportunity. So that's one side of the spectrum when we think about search and Rexis, right? The other side of the problem that I'm super excited to go kind of solve, and you asked me a little bit before, like what are or we were talking before this we started the recording about my predictions for the rest of the year. Um, we finally have a real path forward to solve enterprise search, right, inside the organization. This has been a problem for decades. And especially, I talked a little bit about my history working for search engine vendors, working at Microsoft, working with the SharePoint team for a couple of years. This is a really unsolved problem. And what the problem is in enterprise search is large corporates that generate a ton of information, where they put it in documents and PowerPoints and wikis and Slack channels and Teams messages, like and emails, like it's all this information, and no one can find anything, and no one can find any projects, and there's all this sort of waste that happens inside the organization. How do I find the policies? What are the a vendor gave me a offered me a free dinner. Can I accept this? Right? Or I got tickets to a football game, to a football match. Is this legal within our policy to accept it? Or hey, I need to take a holiday. How do I request like certainly all these things about how does a business work, right? These are all sort of the problems, or how do I find an expert that you can help me solve a problem inside of my large organization? These are all problems that we've been trying to solve with enterprise search for decades, and they've
Mm.
been solved really poorly. And it still comes back to you got to know somebody, you talk to somebody, they refer you. Like we tap into our wetware, right, inside the organization. Find that one person inside the team who knows, who's a great connector, talk to them, and they know all the people that you can talk to, and that's how we get stuff done inside of this organization. Um, that's going to get replaced. We're going to have enterprise AI where it's going to have all the information, all the experts, all the data flowing in. Our customer data will be protected. It'll understand the rules. It'll understand the financial data. It'll understand who can get access to that and who can't get access to it. We can allow executives, right, to start to have conversations with the data. Help me really understand, right, why we missed our forecast in Q3 for the Southeast region, right? Instead of having to spin up an analyst and have them go on for, you know, a month preparing for a meeting, an executive will be able to sit down in the middle of the meeting and say, let's just ask. Let's just find out right now. We're in the middle of this call. What happened and why we missed the data? I'm like, oh, there it is. There's an email didn't get crossed, or someone went on holiday for 2 weeks. We missed the end of the quarter, and that's why they had pushed. Some explanation will come out. Oh, okay, well that makes sense. But I
Mm.
never would have known that. Never would have been able to surface that information with all these legacy tools that we have.
Yeah, and that's pretty transformative, especially for companies who have been around for a long time. They're sat on a lot of legacy systems. If they can bring all that data together, how far do you actually think we are of solving and having a potential working solution to that?
So AI is being deployed inside the enterprise right now. I think it's still very much in sandbox phase.
Mm.
I think there are certain companies that are starting to embrace it and starting to make discovery a bit more accessible, but there's still massive data problems, and there's still massive policy problems. There's still massive volume problems that we solve.
Mm.
But the tools are there. We can start to see a roadmap now, right? Where the challenge we had before was the data problems were always there, but the tools just didn't allow us to ask the right questions. They didn't allow us to integrate with these systems in a timely manner. So we can see that. I think my crystal ball is that, you know, in the next couple of years, we'll start to see some real impact from enterprise applications of these capabilities. But it's going to move. What's going to be slower is the change management process inside the organization, right? Not the technology. That's not going to be the barrier anymore.
Fair. And so if you touched on there, you know, we'll potentially have agentic Eric and agentic Chris working for us in a not so distant future. You know, companies like Meta have built businesses on ad revenue. You know, if agentic Chris is now surfing the internet on my behalf, how do you think that will affect, you know, a business like Meta who have built a business on ad revenue?
Yeah, you know, um, the we've all been, you know, everyone we watch television. Um, uh, you watch, you know, you watch TV shows, you watch movies, and we all hate interruptions of ads. We see ads plays, we've got ad blindness on websites, in lots of places, and it's not a pretty thing, right? It sort of distracts us from the content we're getting to. But the ad model has been pretty resilient to a number of technology advances over the last couple of decades. And it's been hard. You know, everyone's been trying to come up with a better way to monetize some of this content or a better way to generate revenue from this content, and it's been tricky. Been super hard. And they haven't come up with a better solve than ads yet. So, but that being said, right, I think there's a number of enabling technologies that are starting to come into play. And again, going back into Eric's crystal ball here and looking at the future, you know, it's going to take a lot, and there's a lot of inertia around ads, just because it's a tried and true business model. People are making a lot of money. Google, you know, Google's an ad business, right? It's 95%, 90 plus percent of their revenue. I don't have the numbers on hand, right? Comes from advertising. So it's going to take a lot of inertia to move away from that, especially for businesses, you know, generating billions of dollars in
Mm.
revenue. However, there is there's a confluence of things that are starting to come together. Think about artificial intelligence, and we think about distributed technologies. And I'm not talking about necessarily crypto, but underlying blockchain technology, right? The notion of a distributed ledger, right, where I can attribute anything to anyone over time. You know, take the example of buying a house. If you buy a house in the UK, right? What is the biggest bottleneck, right? In buying that house. You know, it's all the time that the barristers have to do, that the lawyers have to go through to validate that you've got all the pieces of information that chain up right into, you know, did they put the right windows in? Have they the right certifications? Have the right compliance? Is there, you know, is there you know, a historical compliance that I've got to preserve? In terms of the style of the house, like all these things need to be checked. Now, imagine that over time you have a house and all these things can be put on the blockchain. And I can go into the blockchain and go pull out all the records of this house. And in that record of the house are all the certificates, all the compliance certificates, all the you know, all the additions, all the new windows that are put in, all the new boilers that are put, the heating certification, the roofing, the temperature, all that stuff was there, and all I had to do is go pull it back, and it was in a record for me, and I could see exactly who did it. I could go talk to them because there was this sort of distributed ledger, right? This distributed record, a big distributed database of all this information. So anyway, long point. I'm a belabored point, but what I'm getting to, right, is that I can now think about applying this modality of distributed ledger to a number of different businesses. Think about health for a second, for a minute. Right? What if I can tie, you know, every doctor's appointment I have to, so, and again, it's something I own, right? I can give rights to somebody else to access this, but now I have got something that's incredibly valuable. Maybe I've got a DNA scan, or I've got a particular genome that could be incredibly valuable to a drug company who's trying to build a targeted cancer cure or a cure or a medicine for a really particular rare disease. If I can now capture all that medical information and share it in a way, that becomes an incredibly valuable thing that I can share and create a value exchange to an organization that's looking for it. And so start thinking about how we can leverage distributed technologies, blockchain technologies on top of AI to deliver hyper personalized and incredibly personalized solutions. There creates a new marketplace for value
Mm.
exchange, right? That allows us to then move on. Now, this is 10, 20 years in the future. This is going to take some time, right? Just
Yeah.
because these systems are large, and have a lot of inertia, but you can see now a path forward.
Yeah, I think, blockchain and AI is probably, another podcast altogether.
Yeah, we'll
But
leave the listeners hanging for that one, and we can come back and we can get that one another time. And I think we
yeah,
should bring a Web3 expert in to talk about it, because I really just skimmed the surface on that area. But I could see these things come together. We haven't even layered quantum on top of that, which analysis
mm,
allows us to to compute these things instantaneously.
yeah, fair. And, we're moving at such a rapid pace. We originally got speaking about DeepSeek last week, which is, like I said at the start of the podcast, why we came together today. It feels like old news, but I think let's let's discuss it. How have you? I think you raised some interesting points when we originally spoke about democratizing the market and it's changing things, but potentially in a positive way. What are your thoughts on the short and long term effects of that coming to market?
Yeah. We spoke at the beginning of this call about different models that were coming out there, and how sort of every model was sort of catching up with ChatGPT in a lot of ways. Some were maybe catching up and maybe surpassing it, maybe, but then ChatGPT would put out a new version, and there wasn't really sort of anything new that was coming out. And in terms of these benchmarks, right, we were sort of incrementally improving the benchmarks a bit by bit, month over month, quarter over quarter. And then OpenAI released these things called reasoning models. They've been labeled O1 or O3 are these reasoning models. And this gets into the sort of first step in this agentic journey, where a model, basically what it does, it takes a lesson out of what our parents told us, right? Chris, Eric, don't just answer the first thing that pops in your head. When I ask you a complicated question, as we learned this in school, stop and think about it for a minute, right? Think about what the answer to the question is, right? This is what these models are doing, right? They've been now told, right, to, instead of just giving the first answer back, comes to you, stop, think about it for a minute. Have a look around and reason out, well, what are different possible solutions or different answers or different rationales for answer for a question. So that's one thing that started to happen. And so DeepSeek is a reasoning model. Now, what was innovative about DeepSeek, right, is that instead of training on all the raw data that like ChatGPT or Anthropic or Gemini or Meta or these guys are building on, instead of building, and that the raw data is, like here's a website, here's a product, here's, this is an apple, here's a picture of an apple, right? So things, right? What they started doing is they started training themselves on solution, right? On plan. So they would take a plan, they would go, and I think there was some evidence that they were actually taking these completed plans, either from their own internal model, a version called V3 that they were using themselves, or taking them from ChatGPT. And they were looking at these plans and saying, let me train on this entire plan, right? So a series of steps, a workflow of from start to finish. Here was the goal. Here's the things that I did. Here was the outcome. And then I use that as a plan. We use that as a training thing. And so as a block of training. And so what it did is then they created a mathematical system to reward the system for creating plans that were as efficient as the original plan they were trained on, and then throw out the other plans. So instead of getting it to think in words and sentences, got it to think in full plans. And that's a big deal, right?
Mhm.
And that's what we're starting to see in these reasoning models, is this notion of I can, so it's building on standing on the shoulders of giants, right? And that in order to come up with a plan, I've got to train on all these little elemental things. Then I can build a plan, and they can train on top of the plan, right? It's like the Lego block kind of thing, right? You don't sit there and pour your own plastic. You have these blocks that are a certain size, and you can sort of stack them up and make houses and cars. So that was one big thing that I think was really revolutionary. And then the other thing that they did, which sort of got everyone head scratching a bit, and this is where it got a bit competitive a little bit, is and no, and we weren't 100% sure on kind of what chips they were using, but due to export controls that were set up in place by the US, they didn't have access to the latest and greatest GPUs from like NVIDIA, right? That the American labs have. These GPUs were, they cost 40,000 a piece, and they're they did have a lot of them. Let's be clear. They had a lot of chips, but there were these memory constrained chips. There were these chips that were had slightly access to less memory, slightly slower bandwidth than chips. So they did some really incredible math to take advantage of these constrained environments, and they were able to train the model at a fraction of the cost. So the run, instead of it costing hundreds of millions or tens of millions or hundreds of millions, they're able to do a training run that costs about $5 million in compute, which is like an order of magnitude smaller than the big labs were. So one, they were able to train on plans, build on top of logic that built on top of plans, and then reward the system for plans. They were able to work within a constrained environment to do it a lot cheaper. And then three, they made it completely open source so people could repeat it and put it out there again and replicate the results. So, people came at it from all kinds of angles. Is this a psyop? Or, it was super convenient that this got launched on the same day that Trump had announced his tariff plans. And was this planned? Was this done by the government? And, that's 4D chess in my world. I think, there's some evidence that this was sort of a natural progression. If you look at what they've been deploying over the last year and a half, maybe the timing was a bit off, and but they had been working on this thing for a good year or two, and you can see the progress that they were making, and they were going in this direction. So it was kind of it was in my mind, it was what do they say is invention? Necessity is the motherhood of invention, kind of thing. Like when we give ourselves constraints, we find ways around those constraints, and that's what happened. And I think the other thing that was there is that it came from China, and so suddenly we're saying, hey, we've been paying all this attention to what's going on in America, right? And we know like TikTok is happening, we know ByteDance is doing some cool stuff over there, but suddenly this thing came out of these labs in China, and we now have really leveled the playing field in terms of who's contributing the most really valuable frontier models.
Yeah, so it's super interesting. Gonna be interesting to see, like I say, not the next year, but the next 6 months, plays out. I think that's as far as anyone dare look into the future at the moment. And, just closing, question, Eric, what are you most excited to see as we kind of progress into this year? Feels like a super exciting start to the year. What's exciting you the most?
There's so much. I think, I'm super excited. I think there's a number of things that I'm super excited about. One, I'm really enjoying sort of this productive pace of change. It's been a lot of fun just to watch it, to see the tools evolve. We haven't really cracked into audio creation, image creation, video creation, right? So this whole notion of multimodality, right, we haven't really spoken about it all. That's coming at an incredible pace. We're seeing a ton of stuff in the robotics field. Robotics was always so these quirky arms that you kind of moved up and down, and they were doing some cool things in manufacturing and cars. But now we're seeing this whole notion of, and it's not just your Roomba anymore, but a real humanoid robot that's coming out, coming to the market quickly, that's learning to navigate around, a very complex environment based on these same set of tools. So we have multimodalities, we have multiple form factors coming out. We're going to see, I think what I'm most excited about, this is something we didn't hit on yet, is literally came out yesterday from OpenAI, that they're they realize internally that we're releasing all these things sort of piecewise, right? So I've got a reasoning model here, and I've got a planning model here, and I've got something that can go control my web browser there, and I got something that can go do some deep research. Well, this is all going to come together, right, in a really cohesive package. And so as a user, I'm not going to have to go off and say, for this particular request, I would like you to create a task for me and make sure you run it every day. For this particular request, I want you to go use a web browser to go figure it out for me. And for this particular task, I want you to use a reasoning model. I'm going to be able to sit down with the AI and say, here's the problem I want to solve, right? Here's the goal that I have in my mind. Again, thinking agentically, it's going to be able to figure out how to use its internal models and its strengths and weaknesses to figure out which bits to use for what, to assemble that thing for you, and then go solve that problem. So that problem of having to figure out and navigate all these spaces, that's going to go away. And so those are, I think that's the thing that's the most exciting. And then this is going to show up in my phone, right? And I'm going to have access to this anytime I want to. I'll be able to create applications. I'll be able to solve problems. It's the matrix. I need to learn how to fly a helicopter, right? tell me how to ride a motorcycle, and it'll effectively be there, right?
Nice. Yeah, it's similar for me as a solo founder. Agentic workflows are a blessing, and even when the market changed so much since I set up the business last year, but using AI in the business and AI assistants are what I'm really looking forward to. And we're also using Replay as well. A customer had a particular problem, and we've used a no-code app on Replay to help them solve the problem, which is, I can't code, and having things like that at your fingertips is amazing. So,
No code
um,
tools, Lovables out there, Replets out there. You know, we're those of us, we're not gonna need these heavy skills anymore to go build these to solve some simple problems. So it's exciting. I
yes,
agree.
certainly. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on for sharing your knowledge. I've actually learned a lot from you today, so I'd like to say thank you. And yeah, appreciate your time. And if anyone's got I guess, a question about AI adoption in their organization, are you happy for them to reach out to you?
Absolutely, yeah, please do reach out, connect. Let's connect on socials, let's have that conversation. We do run, which is exciting, we do run, a monthly dinner in London, and, we'd love to have people come and share their stories at this monthly dinner, so I'll post that online as well. It's a great place to learn, join the community. We're all learning from each other, right? That's one of the biggest things I say when I go into an organization. Someone says, "Eric, you've got this great expertise." I said, "You know what? You've got the business understanding. You know how your business works, and together we learn together how do we solve these things." And that's, I think, the most fulfilling thing right now when you work with clients, when you meet new friends, when you meet new colleagues, when you join the community, and we share how we solve problems.
Nice. Yeah. What I'll do is I'll put the link to the dinner in the description as well. And yeah, if anyone's got any questions, they can reach out. But thank you so much, Eric. It's been great to chat.
Chris, it's great to chat to you as well. Thanks so much for having me on, and thanks for the amazing questions. Really good. I can see. I love where you're going with all these things. I think things that are on the top of a lot of people's minds. So it's great to be able to put them out there and have a conversation about.
Thank you so much.